I've had a I've had a very rough time as a fan of Aldoron over the last couple months. They didn't give him the love that I had hoped for in the anime, and he ended up getting off-screened, then revived in the manga again, which was again it was very strange. And I'm wondering what exactly the why exactly that is the case. We're going to get to that at some point and figure out what's going on with Alderon, because he still hasn't spoken at all since he's come back initially. But I wonder what that is really, what the point for him is. When you look at each of the dragon gods, I think each of them in their individual locations have their own in their own existence in the current placement of the story, like their own individual roles right now as the next stage of events are going to progress once right now is done. Because when we look at all the events right now, it's like we don't count Ignia because Ignia isn't controlled. He is directly confronting Ferris. I imagine after their first battle, something pretty significant is probably going to shift in events, just because one of the two of them should be out of commission. I'd be really interested if maybe it was like Ferris did something where I'm thinking of something kind of like Bleach, like when Ulquiorra was trapped. I can't remember exactly the thing was called off the top of my head. I know it's in Spanish. The when Grimjaw put him in that little box. But if she like traps them specifically in another dimension, and Ignia just says that's just goes with it for the sake of the fight, and it plays similarly to how for those who have read Rave Master, you have the fight of I'm trying to make sure I don't mix up names, but for Seaheart and not Seaheart, see right there, Seagreen and Haja, where they came back a week later and they were still fighting. So something like that, where we have events like where they're out of the story for a while, completely unknown. And it doesn't have to be like, 2 years in the story, but you have current events kind of get set up, finished, not finished, but kind of settled in a way that we can say like, okay, the characters now can have some downtime for the most part. You say like a week or something passes, or even just 3 or 4 days passes, and then they come back and they've been fighting this whole time. I think that would be really cool. I don't know, something in terms of what is going to show their display. But outside of that, you look at each of their locations, and each of them seem to have their own current thing that is going to progress through the story. And I think that's why Mishima has been like having weird little pokes at them. And the one that backs it the most, because like if you look at, say, Wendy with Diablos, okay, we saw that what was going on there only for a brief moment, but then we didn't stay there. Well, okay, well, why did we just show that a brief moment? Same thing with Gray and Viernes. It was just to show their current location, say what was going up. When we have the current stuff in Jermil going on, and it's like, okay, well, obviously that's where the main events at the current point are transpiring, but then why would we see other events when we didn't see that really with what was going on for the most part with Luthi? We saw a little bit with Natsu, and a little bit with Natsu fighting Brian, but that was really just Natsu in a 1v1 as Brian was just showing off some of the effects of being dragonized. So when you look at it though, I almost stopped the recording, I had to be careful. When you look at it though, with Lucy's stuff, you'd think after Mercphobia and everything was settled, we would have Lucy be like, okay, she is going to now get a figure, like a complete and total figure of the situation updated. Her and Mercphobia are gonna have some form of information. It was going to be something that shows, okay, this spot is done. But we ended that, not really ended, but we left off last really with Lucy, is that we saw Mercphobia and Aquarius had some form of past knowledge, not knowledge, but knowledge of each other, but I imagine interactions, which I think makes sense. Like, she is a water spirit, like she's pretty much the water spirit, and he is a water dragon god, so I think it makes sense at some point she would interact with them throughout their history, especially like if she can just pop, like, when she's not interacting with Lucy being summoned and these are her contracts, she could easily just summon herself at a point in the real ocean and like kind of hang out and do her own thing. And then, because like with Lucy, if she says I'm not going to summon on this day, if Aquarius shows up into their world, it's a full day for her if she wants to stay there. Obviously, it's completely easy for her because it's a complete fraction of what it is in Celestial Spirit World, because like for them a day is 3 months almost outside. So she's like kind of makes sense to have at points to be able to have full travel and explore to go see him. So it lines up to where it's like, okay, well, why is that important? Why is that important though? And then we didn't leave on. We didn't really show that. Gray is allegedly alone. I know some people say that Athena is gonna go and aid him, which I think would make sense to a degree, but it's like she still has that gaping hole in her stomach, doesn't she? Last time I saw her, I'm pretty sure she still had that giant hole in her. So I mean, like, she's still damaged. I don't imagine she's gonna be able to fight at her full capability. I don't really know, and I still believe that once we see Viernes. And one of the reasons why we didn't have him like even say a word once we last saw him is he's not going to be controlled like the other dragon gods are, because I think that the alchemy involved in this that would affect them and everything, the mass ability, I think just being a superior alchemist, he'd be able just to kind of shrug it off. And then with Aldoron though, you know, I wanted to kind of go about obviously the situations before we're going to go into Aldoron, but for the kind of like the most part with Aldoron, what is the point of bringing him back in such recurrence if you're not going to immediately show, you know, him in action? Because it's like he came back and all it was is like the fight kind of like broke out on him and he hasn't done anything since. We don't really know what's going on with Aldoron in his brain, and the locker room was destroyed, so like what's going on with Aldoron? So I think with this there's going to be a point in the story that is going to kind of shift, but I think that right now, you know, and I'll talk about really where I think it's going to shift with Aldoron specifically in the next portion. But I think what's important right now is Natsu is now going to where Ignia and Ferris is, and I think we might actually get a display of something that I'd been hoping we would see at some point. And this is what I thought we might see initially, once I thought like, the idea, the layout of the story is Natsu would get like the first big crazy power up was against what my idea of was going to be the biggest dragon or something, where it was going to be more direct. I didn't think it was going to be Mercphobia like way back originally. I just thought like the idea of like, okay, what kind of dragons? And I was like, one of them is probably going to be really big. I did not anticipate it was going to be as big as Aldoron was, but just like the idea of the roster, I was thinking like really old dragons, you know, ones that were just gigantic, ones that were it just stand out in general ways you would expect. Because I feel like out of all of them, Aldoron is the easiest one in idea. Maybe him and Mercphobia, just because Mercphobia is like easy in concept, but it's like he has way more in character complexity, whereas Aldoron is very direct, but it's on purpose for how some of the dragons' mindsets were and how exactly he would respond with that culture and that level of power. So I've always liked Aldoron for that, but if personally, for me, I feel like if him back in the story, he's going to have to either be a character that is going to get pretty much taken over in full, I think, by Ferris's side, or he is going to get measuring sticked by Natsu at some point. Because there's a lot going on in this arc I don't see a lot of people talking about, and I'm going to do a video on that specifically right after this. Is the fact that when you think about the Dragon King Festival, the base mechanics of it, and how the signs are all right now, all of this relates to Natsu. And that is going to be a really intriguing thing once we get to just, you know, seeing him in the story again. Because I figured we were going to get E&D, like, get essentially the same, I'll just say the same form. I won't say like exactly like specifics, but the same form that he used against Mercphobia against Viernes. I thought it was going to be Doggermag, but I don't think it was going to be the same form. I thought it would just be Aetherius without Dragon Force involved, so it's just going to be a pure demon one. But I thought maybe we were going to see that with Viernes instead. But and at the current point, I feel like we're going to be getting that, and then it's going to be fighting Aldoron, because Aldoron coming back again, I just don't really know what the point of him is going to be, because we already got a lot of his character, and I don't imagine that Mishima, from at least what I can tell, wants to do a lot more with him from a character standpoint. I'm guessing it's going to be more from like a power level show off standpoint, and you know, maybe Natsu gets a little ethereous bits and he completely starts slamming Aldoron. Like, I always had the idea since seeing Aldoron, because going into the fight, once we saw him like initially, the only thing I figured we were going to see for sure is like the idea of like Natsu with some form of power up and hitting him in his large state and moving him just at that level of mass. And I'm guessing if he's going to come back and just be some form of show of force character, we'll probably get something like that, but we will see. There's a lot right now, I think, that is in the works, because this one I kind of just want to talk about general events and what the point of Aldoron is, because I think Aldoron is so strange right now in existence. This is like part 1 into like kind of like a 3 to maybe 4 if I don't get my full point across, and like kind of like how things are right now. So and I mostly just like want to talk about the weird state of things, of how I feel like this arc's points, I guess, like, and how it's currently constructed with dividing everybody and get everything kind of set up is going to be. And I'll talk about it again further as I go about the next couple of videos, and I will make sure that all of like this set that I want to kind of go gets out before the next set of chapters. So I want to make sure before Natsu even remotely gets up to seeing where Igni and Ferris are. But anyway, other than that, comment below. Tell me your thoughts about exactly are with Aldoron, because if Aldoron came back and started like acting like a character, kind of like Zero came back and started being, you know, he immediately gave more like immediate character expansion and progression once he returned. Whereas with Aldoron, he hasn't said a word, he hasn't come back and done anything. I would assume, unless he's not controlled at all, he's going to be like Mercphobia, and he's going to act more kind of like an animal. But with that, it's like, well, why bring him back again? So it's like, if he's just going to essentially be this really big, powerful, mindless animal, is he just gonna, you know, somebody's gonna fight him? If it's not Natsu, is it gonna be Igni? Is Igni just gonna one-shot him or something? Is Zero gonna drop his Ethereus form and throw him or something? I don't know. We'll see. Other than that, like I said, comment below on what your thoughts are about like the current situation with Aldoron is, because he's just, it's weird that he came back right after they were like, yeah, we off-screened him, and it's like, okay, it makes sense in idea that them as a team can beat the God Seeds and then beat Aldoron if they have like 2 of them, because it's like, you know, you have the God Seeds. I don't imagine Wolfen would be that much of a problem, but you have, you know, spread them out. You have 2 on Aldoron's brain. You have 4 spread apart on the rest. I figured they should just be relatively fine at doing that, and then they beat the weakened brain once they have that time limit. And then assumingly if they have dragon slaying magic to put him down at full, but like apparently if they don't, he just comes back up. Who knows? That's kind of the question right now I have with it. But other than that, we'll get on to the next thing because I've got a lot to talk about. Bye.